Well, the verses that I added sounded really familiar. It's because you heard Jesus say something almost identical back in September. On September 16th, you heard the words from Mark 8, and on September 23rd, Mark 9, and today from Mark 10. 3 times in the Gospel according to Mark, Jesus announces his upcoming suffering, death, and resurrection. You remember the first time Peter rebukes Jesus, and Jesus then rebukes Peter and tells the disciples they must pick up their cross and follow Jesus. They must be willing to lose their life for the sake of him and the sake of the gospel. The second time that Jesus announces his upcoming suffering, death, and resurrection, we hear that the disciples didn't understand, but were afraid to ask. Instead, they start arguing amongst themselves as to who is the greatest. And Jesus responds by taking a little child into his arms and telling them, whoever wants to be first must be last of all and servant of all. And now here is a third time. Jesus announces his upcoming suffering, death, and resurrection. And this time the Zebedee brothers, James and John, ask Jesus to sit in the places of honor when he comes into his glory. And the others complain and grumble out of jealousy. Jesus then emphasizes what he said the first 2 times, that the disciples misunderstood. Whoever wishes to be great must be servant, and whoever wishes to be first must be slave to all. We could wonder how the disciples could be so slow to understand what Jesus was telling them. Why preserve these stories about their human weaknesses? Unless these misunderstandings say something very true about human nature as compared to what Jesus desires for our lives. There's certainly quite a bit of irony in today's gospel reading. And one thing about irony is it kind of is like shines a light on the deeper truths. First, it's ironic that James and John are seeking greatness and glory with Jesus immediately after Jesus tells them how he's going to suffer and die and then be raised up. It's not the glory that James and John seek. Second, within 2 weeks, ironically, there will be 2 people lifted up on Jesus' left and right sides, 2 criminals on their own crosses. And that is certainly not the place James and John seek to be. And third, soon Jesus will be praying in the Garden of Gethsemane for the cup from which he's about to drink, that suffering would pass him by. Jesus himself doesn't want to drink from the cup that James and John are so confident that they want to receive. More irony. And fourth, the baptism which Jesus is about to receive is a baptism into his death. Jesus is going to be fully immersed into what it means to be human, including death. And that is certainly not the baptism James and John seek. Not only do James and John have no clue what they're asking of Jesus, they confidently assert that they can do what they can in no way possibly do. And yet, Jesus still graciously gives them and us his whole life. James and John are doing something that we Christians often do. We confidently declare we can follow Jesus. In fact, just last Sunday, many of us here today declared that we renounce the devil and all forces that defy God, the powers of this world that rebel against God, and renounce the way of sin that draw us from God. We do this each time there is a baptism. We renounce sin and evil with gusto. We reply with the same confidence James and John had. Yes, Jesus, we are able. But no one, not even me, who confidently renounced all the forces that defy God and sin last Sunday, can honestly say that they did not sin this past week, nor were they avoided being persuaded to defy and rebel against God. It happened. Now, a person who does not know Jesus may point his or her finger at us and say, "Ha ha, you hypocrites." But those of us who know Jesus know that our failure reveals how much we need Jesus. And that's what we have to remember first and always. How much we need Jesus. Way too often, our actions ironically show how much people need Jesus and His gracious saving love. But that's not the light that Jesus is asking us to shine when we talk at baptisms about our light shining. It's not how we ironically show how much we need Jesus. We're called in our baptism to shine our light of Christ in what we do. But too often, our actions show that we believe that there's not enough love to share or not enough resources to share. Too often in this world, we get drawn away from God. Too often, we are tempted again and again not to trust, but to fear. Not to put our confidence in God, but instead on our own abilities. Not to help others, but to look out for number one, ourselves. When will we learn how much we all need Jesus? Well, maybe in a sense we are hypocrites, but not when we sin. But whenever we say or do something that shows that we don't need Jesus. We believe and declare a gospel in which Jesus loves and saves the world, and yet we struggle to believe that Jesus can love us. We believe and declare a gospel in which Jesus does all things for our salvation, and yet we persistently act as if we have to do good deeds to save ourselves. Yes, we most definitely need Jesus, not only to tell and show us what it means to serve others and put others first, but to be the one who serves us by saving us. The last time I preached on these verses from Mark 10, I had recently taken a group of youth in my car, my van, to a regional food pantry to do some service work. And as we got loaded, ready to load up in the vans and the cars, several youth cried out, "I got shotgun!" They wanted the place of honor. You've heard that phrase, right? Before, "I got shotgun." First front seat, the vehicle next to the driver. It's a great illustration of what James and John are asking of Jesus, right? They wanted to be in that place up front. So I was thinking, could it be that Jesus desires for us to want to ride shotgun with Him? And what would riding shotgun with Jesus look like and really mean? Notice that when Jesus doesn't answer James and John's request by simply saying, "Nope, you can't do what you just asked." Instead, Jesus kind of like redirects their desire to share in glory into a commitment to share Jesus' service and service to others. Jesus doesn't reprimand them or rebuke them. He just kind of like redirects their request. Jesus can use their desire and enthusiasm. James and John wanted to be near Jesus. Yes, they're thinking of their own glory, but Jesus can still use that. Jesus lets them know that there will be suffering. And they say, "We are able." Yes, James and John may still be thinking of glory as the world defines glory, and as demonstrated by the way the other disciples react to them with jealousy. But we do know that after the resurrection, James and John do indeed serve others for the sake of Jesus and the gospel. And the service does lead to suffering for them. So imagine a group of youth arguing amongst themselves as who gets to ride shotgun. How do they respond when asked, are you able to stay alert and help keep watch? Are you able to look at the map and keep us on track? In other words, are you able and willing to serve so that we don't get lost? One or more would still likely say, like James and John, we are able. So what about you? Are you willing to ride shotgun with Jesus? Are you willing to serve and put others first? Think about what it means to be driving a group of youth somewhere in your car. If you haven't done it, you can volunteer the next time we go somewhere, and it will be so much fun. You don't want to get lost, right? You want to get everybody safely to your destination, and I can tell you with 100% certainty that there will be bickering in the car, silliness, and absolutely incomprehensible behavior that will lead to suffering for the driver. Yes, they want to yell out things, stand and put their head out the sunroof, and yes, it's never easy to serve others. So are you willing to ride shotgun with Jesus and put others first? Direct the lost back to Jesus through your words and actions and loving service. Serve those who are hungry and need clothing. Most importantly, welcoming all, even those who others reject. Are you able? No. Not always. And neither were James and John, not by themselves. You see, James and John were only able after Jesus' death and resurrection. We are only able with the crucified and risen Christ in our lives. You need Jesus, in addition to your willingness to serve others. The good news is that Jesus still and always loves you, even when you're not perfect, even when you doubt yourselves. And Jesus can use your desire and your enthusiasm, your doubts, even your fears, to be near him, to ride shotgun.